Hiya, kiddos. Welcome back to Grandpa Ken's place. Hey, I'm really happy you came back. Bluey and I were just talking the other day. She said, you know what we haven't read lately is a Thomas the Train book. And she likes Thomas the Train. So we're going to read Thomas's Great Discovery. What do you think, kiddos? What could his great discovery be? Huh? What do you think? It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor. Thomas was high in the hills bringing some freight cars to the wharf. At an unfamiliar junction, he saw an old, overgrown track that looked like a shortcut. Uh-oh, Thomas. Soon he was rattling down the steep track. No one has been down this track for a very long time, he huffed. Then Thomas gasped. Fizzling fireboxes! What do you think he sees, kiddos? What do you think? Huh? What is he seeing? He had arrived at a station. It too was overgrown and rusty and very old, and there was crumbling platforms, and the station building was covered with ivy. Thomas had never seen such an amazing sight. What a funny place to have a station, he peeped and looked around some more. There are so many buildings. It looks like an old town, he cried. I can't wait to tell everyone about this. So Thomas bumped and bashed along the old track and finally made his way to the wharf. The next day the news of Thomas's discovery was all over Sodor, and Sir Topham Hatt would want to visit the hidden town at once. Oh, see? Thomas, you have made a wonderful discovery. This was the town of Great Watertown. When a steam engine first came to Sodor, Sir Topham Hatt said this was an important town. It was called the Great Watertown because the springs here provided water for everyone on the island. Why does no one live here now? Puffed Thomas. The springs ran dry and the people left to live in new towns. The maps were lost and everyone thought the town of Great Watertown was lost forever. But now it's found, cheered Thomas. And if we work hard, added Sir Topham Hatt, we can have the rededication of the town on Sodor Day. Wow, look at what Thomas discovered, a lost town. That's pretty neat, kiddos, don't you think? In no time at all, Sodor was working hard to fix up Great Watertown. Because Thomas had rediscovered the town, Sir Topham Hatt put him in charge of all the repair work. Well, that's a good responsibility. It was also Thomas's responsibility to explore all the old tracks around Great Watertown. Thomas liked checking old lines and liked being in charge. He wanted to show everyone he could do everything. But one day, there was trouble. Thomas was puffing too fast and the track was too old. He toppled off the track. Harvey came to lift him back on, but Thomas was bumped and bruised and had to go to the works. Oh no, I hope he's not hurt too bad. Kiddos, what do you think? While Thomas was at the works, a friendly new engine named Stanley was put in charge of the work at Great Watertown. When Thomas was as good as new, he hurried back to Great Watertown. A lot had changed. Sir Topham Hatt met Thomas. Stanley's done a good job, so I've decided that Stanley will stay in charge and you'll help him. Thomas' funnel flattened. He had lost the most important job of all. Oh no. Just because he was doing his job and was hurt? That doesn't seem fair, does it, kiddos? What do you think? The next day, Stanley asked Thomas to shunt some freight cars. Thomas was very good at shunting freight cars, and he really liked doing it, but he didn't like Stanley telling him what to do. Still, he wanted to show how really useful he was, so he shunted freight cars all over Great Watertown. Then he remembered seeing an old freight car stuck in front of the abandoned Morgan's mine. "I'll bring that last one in, sir. Topham Hatt will give me my old job back," he said. At last Thomas found the old freight car and he buffered up, but he biffed the car too hard. It rolled forward and disappeared into the mine. "Oh no!" "Cinders and ashes," explained Thomas. "Where did it go?" He moved ahead and peered inside the mine. "I must finish the job," he huffed. "I'll soon find that freight car," and Thomas puffed into the mine. Uh-oh, look, kiddos. That mine looks a little scary, don't you think? It was very dark. Thomas was happy he had a bright lamp. He looked ahead and saw a freight car rolling away down a slope. Then he disappeared around a bend. "Bust my buffers," puffed Thomas. "I'd better go after it." Thomas whizzed down the steep slope. "Whee!" He whistled, and "Whoa!" he cried. It was scary, but it was also very exciting. Thomas had almost caught up to the freight car when, "You won't get away from me," he whistled happily. But Thomas didn't notice the junction ahead. Uh-oh, kiddos. The freight car whizzed to the right, but Thomas sped to the left and saw that the tunnel ahead was blocked. "Oh no," cried Thomas, and he crashed straight through the blocked tunnel and jumped the track. Now Thomas was deep in the mine in a dark tunnel. To top it all off, his fire had gone out. His boiler would soon grow cold, and there was no one around to hear his whistle. Oh no, kiddos, Thomas is in trouble. The next morning, Stanley and the other engines arrived for work. "Where's Thomas?" Stanley asked. The engines looked around. Thomas wasn't there. Thomas was missing. It was the biggest calamity Sardar had ever known. Everyone looked for Thomas. They checked the quarries. They checked the docks. They toured every town. They scoured every hill and hunted in every valley. But Thomas was nowhere to be found. They went everywhere looking for Thomas, but they couldn't find him because we know where he's at, huh? And then Stanley had a thought. Maybe Thomas is up on the forgotten tracks around Great Watertown. I'll look for him there. Where Stanley was high up in the hills, he whistled and whistled. "Where are you, Thomas?" But only his echo came back. Stanley looked everywhere. Then he spotted Morgan's mine. Could Thomas have gone into the mine? Stanley wondered. He whistled one last time, and this time Thomas heard him. "It's Stanley," he gasped. With his very last puff and his very last huff, Thomas blew his whistle as loudly as he can. Whee! And Stanley heard him. He slowly entered the dark mine. "Thomas," he whistled happily, "is that you?" Thomas had run out of puff. He couldn't whistle again. He could only wait and hope that Stanley could find him. It wasn't long before Thomas heard Stanley chuffing up behind him. Oh, good. Yeah, good. See, he's coming up behind him. Here he comes. "Come on, Stanley, right? Come on, Stanley." "Stanley," he peeped, "I'm very happy you're here." "Thomas," whistled Stanley, "I'm very happy to find you. Where have you been?" "I was trying to be a really useful engine," tooted Thomas. "Don't worry, Thomas," Stanley shuffled. "I'll give you back on the track in no time." Soon Stanley was coupled up to Thomas, and he pulled and tugged and pulled and tugged until Thomas was heavy, but Stanley didn't give up. "I can do it," Stanley wished, and with a mighty heave, he pulled his friend back onto the track. "Hooray!" tooted Thomas. Then there was a very loud crack. The valve in Stanley's boiler had burst. Stanley was a strong engine, but pulling Thomas had been too much. Now Stanley couldn't move. "Don't worry," whistled Thomas. "It's my turn to help you. With your coal, I can push you home." Stanley smiled. "See, that's teamwork, kiddos. That's really good teamwork." In no time at all, Thomas's boiler was bubbling and his steam was whooshing. Thomas found an open siding, got behind Stanley, and started to push. "Here we go, Stanley." Thomas huffed happily. Stanley smiled back, and puff by puff, Thomas pushed Stanley up and out of the mine. The old tracks rattled and creaked, but Thomas didn't mind. He was happy and proud to push his new friend Stanley back home. See what happens when you help friends? Help people, you make friends. At last, Thomas and Stanley pulled into Great Waterton Junction. Thomas was tired, but he had never felt happier. That's how you feel when you help someone. When the other engines saw Thomas and Stanley, they tooted and whistled, "Beep, beep, beep," and soon the sound of engine whistles echoed all around Great Watertown. "Beep, beep." The news quickly spread throughout Sador. "Thomas has been found," the engines whistled. Sir Topham Hatt grandly proclaimed, "Stanley saved Thomas, and Thomas saved Stanley." For the next couple of days, everyone worked hard to get Great Watertown ready for Sador Day. Now Thomas was happy that Stanley had come to Sador. Thomas had a wonderful new friend, and just in time for the celebration, everything was done. The weather for Sador Day was perfect. Sir Topham Hatt arrived and beamed. "Well done, you all. This is the grandest Sador Day ever." He and Lady Hatt stood beside the red ribbon with a great big pair of scissors. "Thanks to Thomas, Great Watertown is no longer lost, and thanks to Stanley, the work was finished right on time. Welcome to the town of Waterton," boomed Sir Topham Hatt, and Lady Hatt then cut the ribbon. "We're all really useful engines," puffed Thomas happily. He couldn't have been prouder. "Aw, Thomas, you're really a good train, and you're very useful, and we love you, Thomas." Well, kiddos, I enjoyed you coming back, and so did Thomas, and so did Bluey. She loves this story. So please tell your grown-up if they'll subscribe. Every time I post a new book, I'll let them know, so you can come back and visit us. You guys have a great day, and thanks for coming to YouTube and watching Grandpa Ken. Have a great day. Remember, your smile doesn't do any good unless you show it.